If you've been around here with the channel for a while, you know I find VR to be one of the more immersive ways to get into gaming. However, I've always had a fondness for first-person games as well, and hell, even third-person games. Whether they be the arena shooters of the past that I grew up with like Doom, the Halo series and beyond, and even third-person titles like Resident Evil, Dead Rising, or even the Grand Theft Auto series. Third-person titles, if done right, still providing an engaging experience without the need to see through your character's eyes. But what if you could? That's the question I aim to answer today by showcasing a few mods that you can try on PC today that can bring the camera into the character's eyes of some of your favorite third-person titles. So without further ado, let's check out some first-person mods for third-person games. Starting off our list, we're going to dive into a little known indie title that nobody really checked out at the time, named Elden Ring? Now, I'm joking, of course, because Elden Ring has been one of the biggest and most successful game launches of all time in recent memory, even garnering a shout out in Love is Blind of all places.
So before we were talking about names.
For our kids?
Yeah.
I know.
What about Godfrey? Godric?
No. Ew.
Now, I've never been a Souls fan leading up to this game, hell, barely even touching the first game in the series, but even I was one to fall into the hype train for this one, and holy shit was the hype justified. Now, if you've lived under a rock and never heard of this one, it's a third-person action role-playing game taking place across the desolate lands between, and it's all about overcoming the odds, upgrading your character, defeating all the bosses, and becoming the very best, like no one ever was. The combat is basically designed for third person in mind, giving ample room for adjustment for incoming attacks by basically being able to see around your character. So how the hell does first person mode work with all of this? Well, the First Person Souls project has been developing a first person mod built to adjust to the game's parameters to basically play with this new perspective in mind. They recently released the full version of this mod and it's been blowing up on the Nexus Elden Ring page, even making a top spot on the top files page, and for good reason. The way this mod works, like most on this list, will basically take the camera and replace your character's head with said camera, giving the illusion that you're seeing through the character's eyes. Now, this does make shadows look a bit awkward. However, the way the First Person Souls project adjusted things to work with this new perspective works incredibly well, with both exploration throughout the world and this game's unforgiving combat.
You died! You suck at this game!
Now, you would think that having multiple enemies around you in combat with this new perspective would give you a disadvantage, but to be honest, this first-person mod works very well with the game's combat. The devs included incoming damage indicators, making it a bit easier to telegraph when an enemy is going to strike. Whether it be multiple enemies around you at once, or a boss with multiple attack patterns, these indicators will display where an enemy's attack's coming from, making it way easier to evade attacks even from behind you. Outside of combat, pretty much everything you interact with, including NPCs that you speak with, will all be displayed in first-person view, which brings back old Elder Scrolls vibes for me. And speaking of Elder Scrolls, the thing I loved about those games was the option to switch between third-person and first-person at any given time, which gave players the chance to play from whatever perspective they wanted at any given time. And thankfully, the devs must have also thought of this as well, because you also have the option to switch camera perspectives. And on top of everything, the mod is also completely adjustable, allowing you to change the field of view, turn the damage indicators off, and even changing the type of crosshair the mod uses, or just turn it off completely, all within the mod's configuration file. This mod adds such a new level of immersion for the game for me that replaying this game has been a hell of a great time with this mod. When I first played Elden Ring, I had the same feeling of wonder and curiosity for a game's world that I had not felt in the game since I first played Morrowind back in the day. So being able to switch between these perspectives on the fly really brings back those nostalgic vibes even harder this second time around.
All done? Well, be on your way then.
Another great role-playing game that I wanted to cover that also has a very in-depth first-person mod is for The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt. Now, The Witcher 3, while not being my favorite RPG of all time, I still think it has some of the best stories to be told in the genre, and still to this day looks insanely beautiful, even before the next-gen upgrade. But since the new next-gen upgrade came out, I decided to jump back into this one and see what all the fuss was about with it. But the first thing I knew I needed was a first-person mod this time around, and thankfully there is one available. The Gravant first-person mod allows you to see through Geralt's eyes, and damn son, it almost feels like this game was made for this perspective in mind. Given that the Red engine this game was developed on did eventually lend itself to a first-person game with Cyberpunk, it almost feels like it just fits here. The world of The Witcher is even more vibrant to look at as well. from the jaw-dropping vistas you come across on the back of Roach to walking around the streets of Novigrad. Each interaction you have really feels like you're in Geralt's shoes. It also comes with adjustable key bindings as well to allow for camera switching and much more. The mod allows you to adjust certain camera parameters as well with Geralt's body in first person by removing certain body parts, but honestly, going with the recommended settings gives the best perspective, especially in combat. Now, combat is admittedly where this mod falls apart a bit for me, but let me explain. While the combat is a lot more immersive in this perspective and it actually flows very well by keeping the camera stable, even with rolls, it's really just missing something. And I feel like after playing the Elden Ring mod, I think I figured it out. It's the damage indicators. By not having these available in The Witcher 3, it kind of keeps you at a disadvantage in combat in first person because you're not always going to tell if, say, old Jim Bob's going to backstab you with an axe if he's behind you. So it can be a bit of an annoyance. However, I still find this to make the combat a bit more gripping, and after some practice with the combat, you can start to get used to this new view. I definitely recommend checking this one out if you're itching to replay The Witcher 3 again, but are looking to change things up a bit. Switching gears from fantasy and into things a bit closer to the real world, let's check out one of my favorite open world games of all time, Grand Theft Auto 4. Grand Theft Auto 4 is hands down my favorite of the GTA series, and for good reason. GTA 4 has one of the most gripping stories I've ever experienced in gaming, even for how long the story may be. Plus, Liberty City, loosely based on New York, even for 2008, was teeming with life and had so much to offer in terms of world building, and having a city of this scale, breathing with life all throughout its streets, was an achievement for gaming at the time thanks to Rockstar. Plus, GTA 4, even to this day, still has one of the more immersive physics systems with the Euphoria engine powering everything underneath the hood, giving lifelike interactions when engaging with NPCs out in the world. Now, it wasn't until the first re-release of GTA 5 that the series would introduce an official first-person perspective into the series. However, thanks to the power of modders, we can now thankfully look through the eyes of Niko Bellic and experience his incredible story in a whole new way.
Hey, yo, man, we're brethren, right? Give it up, man. Aye, man.
Just like most mods in this video, this mod will basically replace Niko's head with said camera. This allows you to see Liberty City from a whole new view, and honestly, it makes the city feel even larger than it already was. Mix in a few graphics mods for this game and it almost starts to look real in certain views. Having this new perspective allows you to see almost every interaction Niko has through his eyes, but when it comes to what you can do and see in first person, it kind of depends on what mod you're using. One thing you'll notice from both mods that I'm going to cover in a sec is that some cutscenes may be a bit bugged due to this new camera change, and you'll find yourself clipping through some walls and even floors at times. But anyways, the two mods that I'm talking about are a standalone first-person mod made by
Z06all,
and the other is included in the ZMenu by Zolika, which has been making fantastic mods for a while now for the GTA series. The standalone first-person mod by
Z06all
is nice, and it's one I've actually used for a while now, because all you have to do with this one is simply just install it, and when in game, just double tap the view button, and boom, you're in first person. This mod's good if you don't want to have too much setup and want to just jump straight into first person view in the game, but it does have its downsides. Shooting both from cover and from inside of a vehicle is incredibly buggy, leaving you barely ever hitting your target, and leaves you at a huge disadvantage during combat scenarios. Of course, you could just switch to third person in these scenarios, but these gameplay moments can also be disabled in the mod's configuration file, which is also a nice plus. But one major drawback from this mod in particular that I found was that the reticle is just slightly off when shooting, meaning you have to aim slightly off center just to crack headshots, and that's really rough with this game's combat system. However, the other method that I want to talk about through the ZMenu has now become my go-to way of experiencing this game in first person. The first-person perspective can be enabled via the ZMenu. It can be adjusted on the fly as well, while in-game, meaning you won't have to leave the game to make certain adjustments, which is a big plus in my book. You can also hide certain body parts of Niko's to help with adjusting the mod to your liking, but my favorite part about this method of using first-person with the ZMenu is that cutscenes can also now be experienced through Niko's eyes. This really kind of gives a Cyberpunk 2077 vibe by having a lot of cutscenes in first-person view. Of course, since you aren't supposed to see these cutscenes from this angle, you will of course have a graphical bug or two, or hell, even 10. But having custom key bindings set with this mod menu, you can basically switch back and forth through the cinematic camera and through Nico's eyes in an instant.
You see that, man?
And this is by far my favorite first-person mod on this list, and I've actually been replaying the game to 100% over on my Twitch in first-person mode. So if you want to see a bit more footage live, you can actually catch me over there for some hot GTA action later this week.
You look like you really need
Hey, welcome in, Infiltrate. What up, bro? Welcome in. Oh, shit. I also wanted to briefly cover the classic Grand Theft Autos as well. And no, I'm not talking about those dog shit remakes either, like the definitive edition. I'm actually talking about the original classic GTAs from the early 2000s. That's right, GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, all the OG versions. And all of these different ones have their own first-person mods as well, to allow you to pretty much re-experience these classics through your character's eye holes. And these pretty much work exactly like you'd expect, even letting you switch to this perspective by switching cameras in-game. And they all have their own in-game menus to make adjustments with as well. The one that stands out for me though is GTA 3, simply for the fact that Grand Theft Auto 3 almost had an official first-person mode included in the original PC release of this game. A lot of the code was left in the game files, and the brilliant modder Genius Z brought this code back to allow this cut perspective to be played with. The entire game is playable from this perspective and is a ton of fun to mess around with. In GTA 3, all weapons have their own unique animations in first person, albeit very basic, but it kind of gives an arena shooter vibe from the early days of gaming, which is kind of fun. Overall, I recommend checking out all of these if you've been itching to replay the classics once again, just in a bit of a different way.
Am I gonna get to play with your big ends again?
What?
The last Rockstar game we'll be covering here is actually Rockstar's foray into the Max Payne series with Max Payne 3. Now, the Max Payne series is no stranger to first-person mods. In fact, G-Man Lives covered the first two games in his video on the same exact subject, which is actually a huge inspiration for this same video, which you should definitely go check out if you have not seen his video on first-person mods. And hell, this mod itself was also a big reason why I made this video in the first place. With Max Payne 3 already being a stellar action title with some of the best third-person combat I've ever experienced in a shooter, it's no surprise that a first-person view works extremely well with this game's mechanics. Since this game is all about precision, lining your shots correctly and having the ability to perform bullet time and even shoot dive when necessary, it makes me wonder why no one is making first-person shooters with bullet time anymore. The only game I can think of that's trying to achieve the same type of gameplay, at least off the top of my head, is Out of Action, and that game has no release date in sight, so this is the best we're gonna get for now. The way Max is able to dive out of the way of bullets, dive from cover, and even lay on the ground to take out enemies after a dive leaves you with some of the most immersive first-person combat I've played around with in a while. But this type of gameplay is right up my alley, and it's incredibly fun to play with. The mod even gives you its own mod menu in-game, allowing you to change the FOV on the fly, the camera's position, and since this is basically running off the same engine as GTA 4, switching camera perspectives is as easy as hitting the same button to change views from those games. There's not much clipping from this view except for one chapter in particular in the stadium, when Max is given a headset to communicate with Passos. It stays on Max's head, and it can clip with the camera, but just switching views for a few moments isn't really a big deal. Keeping in mind though, you're still going to be playing through Max Payne 3, so expect control to be taken away from you every 10 seconds with a new cutscene. Overall though, I think this is one of my favorites on this list, just for the fact that I got to replay this entire game with this mod, and man, it was a blast to play through. Pun definitely intended. Now last but very much not least, I wanted to cover a relatively newer mod release for the original 2008 release of Dead Space. Now, I know the new Dead Space remake just came out, but at least from what I can tell, there's no first-person mod in sight for this one, at least from what I can see. However, the one that just dropped by Reverse Engineering Gamer on Nexus for the original Dead Space is some of the best times that I've had with a horror game in a while. I mean, outside of the RE4 remake, of course. But damn man, seeing through Isaac's eyes on this desolate space station full of aliens that just want to rip your throat out, well, yeah, it's fucking terrifying in this new perspective. The way the mod author made this work was not only moving the camera to Isaac's eyes and removing the head from the character, but also removing certain body parts like Isaac's upper torso to avoid any form of camera clipping. I thought this would be a bit of a nuisance, but it actually helps quite a bit to circumvent any actions from clipping with your camera. Plus, the mod also provides multiple field of view options to choose from to avoid, motion sickness with limited control, as well as the option to turn the mod on or off, of course. Since the camera still moves in a way that it does in third person, it gives a bit more weight to your character when you move around, really giving you the sense that you're moving around in a set of power armor throughout the game. It can be a bit tanky, but I feel it works to this game's advantage, you know, given the game is a horror title after all. And of course, combat works extremely well. The way the HUD elements work being displayed on your character, it really gives you a sense of playing in Isaac's boots. Even the upgrade panels and so forth work really well in this camera's perspective, even if it's a bit off center. The only thing you're not going to be able to see is Isaac's health counter, but just switching into third person real quick to see where your health is at is not that big of a deal. Or just not seeing it at all can add a bit more immersion. Now, I did have a few crashes in the game with this mod installed, and it would usually happen when using the workbenches, so if you do end up using this, just expect crashes to happen, and remember to save quite often, or else you're gonna get fucked. If anything, the best takeaway for me on this mod is that it kinda gives me those old Doom 3 vibes. Like for me, it feels like Dead Space in first person does Doom 3 better than Doom 3 did, if that makes sense. I don't know, even after just editing this footage and looking back at it too, it just gives major Doom 3 vibes. But yeah, definitely check this one out. And while we've covered a majority of the games that I was able to check out for this video, I did want to leave a couple of honorable mentions before we end the video. I wanted to highlight some of Prey Dog's mods for the RE framework that's available for the recent Resident Evil games. With the RE framework, you can actually play Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake both in first person, and it works incredibly well. And one more thing to note is that Prey Dog is actually developing a first-person injection for Resident Evil 4 Remake as well. But with some of the animation work in RE4, I can see it being a bit tough to implement first-person properly, so hopefully we see something from them about it soon. And lastly, while I was actually in the process of making this video, I saw some hype building up around the Last of Us first-person mod, and goddamn, that looks great. Hopefully we see more from that one soon, because that's definitely going to get me into buying the PC version finally. Anyways, that's a list of first-person mods available for different games that you can actually check out today on PC. And if there's one thing that I can take away from playing all these different mods in this list is that I wish more games would implement this option to switch between first and third person. And if a game does provide a first-person option, instead of the game using two different animation sets between the two different perspectives, kind of like Elder Scrolls does, why not just make small adjustments to the character's already set animations to complement that new perspective? I feel like it would just save a lot of animation time for the devs. I don't know, that's just a random thought, but hopefully more games implement this type of stuff in the future. But until then, we'll just leave it up to the power of modders. Anyway, I'll be leaving links to these mods down below in the description. If you find anything here of note or value, please leave a like or comment down below, or hell, even subscribe if you'd like to see more. I appreciate you all for the love and support on the channel lately. It's been massively welcome, and I hope you all stay tuned for what's coming next. Anyways, I'll see you all next time. Blado out.